Alright guys, so another way to make a service is just to inherit directly from the service class. And it's a little bit different than an intent service, and by the time you understand everything about services, you're going to learn when to use each one and the benefits of each. But for right now, let me show you guys how to do this. So if you right click your package and select new service and then just choose regular service, not intent service, then what this is going to do, we'll just keep the default name for now, is it's going to give you a file that again inherits directly from the service class. Now before I show you guys how to make this, let me just go ahead and android util.log, just set up all my log messages stuff. So I'm going to put it right above the constructor, that variable, private static final. Probably should just copy this string tag and set it equal to this. Alright, and we probably should go to our filter and make sure that everything is set up properly. So now we can essentially print out log messages. So the first thing I want to show you guys is this. By default, it gives you two methods, and this is, you always need these methods whenever you're using this type of service, the constructor, and we really don't need to do anything in the constructor right now, so we can just leave it like there, no code necessary. Another thing is it gives you this method right here. Now there's actually another type of service called a bound service, and I'll probably teach that in the next tutorial, but for right now all we can do is we can actually just return null right here, because this tutorial is not going to be a bound service, and what those are and how to use them, not really important right now, because right now I'm just going to show you guys how to create a generic service. Alright, let me adjust right here, and after this constructor, what I want to do is I want to override a few methods. So go to Alt, Insert, Override Methods, and the first thing I want is on start command. Now essentially whenever we start our service, we're going to put the code of what we want our service to do in here. So this is pretty much the meat of it. Inside here is whatever you want your service to do. Now another thing I want to do is I want to inherit on destroy. And this is going to be called whenever your service, of course, is destroyed. Easy stuff right there. So I'm just going to print out a log message on destroy so you guys can see when it's getting called. So log.i tag, and I'll just write something like on destroy is method called, something like that. Alright, looking good. So now let's go to on start command, and we can actually just delete all of that. So again, this is when your service starts. So whenever it starts, of course, you want it to do something. Now just to demonstrate a few things, the first thing I'm going to do is just print out when this command is being called, so then in the little log section we can see when it's happening. And another thing that I want to do is this. So again, remember, a service is just a process that runs in the background, and the user doesn't interact with it at all. It doesn't have an interface or anything like that. Now the proper usage of a service allows for the user to continue using their phone while whatever happens in the background just happens unknown to the user. So what we need to do to make that happen is we need to take whatever code is in our service and stick inside a new thread. Now the reason that we didn't do that in the last tutorial with the Bucky's intent service is because an intent service, it makes its own thread automatically. That's how Android is set up. However, it doesn't on this type of service, inheriting directly from the service class, but we get some other benefits as well, as we'll see later. So of course we already know how to make threads. Runnable r equals new runnable, and sweet, so make sure to throw that in there. Now, of course, in run is what you want to do. So all I'm going to do for this little example is I'm going to make a loop, and this is going to be real stupid, by the way. Just set I equal to 0, and we'll say like I is less than 5 and I plus plus. So again, this loop is just gonna loop 5. Actually, let's go ahead. Well, it's good enough for right now. So right now, I'm just gonna pretty much just wait, just like we did before. And I probably should just go get the code for my other tutorial, but too lazy to do that. So we can recap. So system dot current time millis, and we'll just add 5 seconds to it. So that's 5,000 milliseconds equals 5 seconds. And now we can just make a little while loop. So while the current time is less than the future time, then what do we want to do? Synchronize this. Alright, so we finally get to the good stuff. So all we're going to do is we're going to try to alright, let's just wait. So we're just going to wait like before, and we're going to take that future time and subtract the current time. And why is it giving me an error? And it is because I didn't catch my exceptions. Exception E. Alright, so after this waits, I should probably print out a little log message too, so you guys can see what's going on. So all this log message is going to say is, I don't know, service is doing something. Alright, so this service is pretty dumb. The only thing it's doing is it's waiting for 5 seconds, 5 different times in a row, and it's just going to print out service is doing something. But of course you would want to put some code in here, like downloading images or checking a database for whatever you want to happen. But now that it's stuck on a new thread, it's not going to interfere with whatever else the user wants to do on your app, like changing screens, clicking buttons, playing the game, whatever. So now that we have this background process set up, the only other thing we need to do is kick off this thread. So I'm just going to name mine Bucky's thread, and of course you set it equal to new thread. Holy moly, thread. And what was our object? R. So this R is the code that we want to run inside the thread. So now we just need to start it. So start, and of course, since all of this code is going on the onStart command, we need, or excuse me, the onStart method, we need to return something. Now just return this. If you call service dot start sticky, as you can see, it was the first thing that popped up. There is, I believe it's start sticky and alright, start sticky and start not sticky. So what start sticky means is you don't really need to worry about it that much, but if your service ever gets destroyed by the Android operating system for any reason, then start sticky just means restart the service. And if you call start not sticky, then the service is not going to be restarted if it ever gets destroyed. So again, not really important right now. Just remember to return service start sticky. Now the last thing we actually need to do, one little itty bitty line of code, is on your apples we need to say, okay, you created a service, but when do you want to start running this service? Well, I'm just gonna put it right here on onCreate because I don't know, I don't want to do anything too fancy. And just like anything else, make a new intent with this, and what was it? Pass in the name of that class where your service is, and as you know, to start a service, you just start service I. So whenever this apple's activity is going to get created, which we are going to do right now, it's going to start that service, and all this service is going to do, actually what I would like to do is go to my logcat, make sure we're on Bucky's filter, and again, like I was saying, all this service is going to do is wait and print out something. However, it's going to be running in the background, which is really cool. So there you have it. Check it out. Their service is working. Service is doing something. I can click continue to interact with my app, and it doesn't interfere with the user experience at all. Pretty stinking awesome. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create a service manually from inheriting from the service class. And remember, whenever you do so, you should really stick your code inside a thread, and it's going to create an awesome user experience for your customer. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you guys about something called bound services. Now, the services that we created in the last couple tutorials, they were great and all, but if you guys ever try to have any level of communication between your app and that service, it may have caused some issues. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys about bound services, and it allows us to communicate with the service a little bit better than the old ones. So the first thing I did is I started a brand new project, and I didn't do anything weird. I just chose blank activity. So again, we got one Java file, one design, pretty boring. And what I want this app to do, of course, I need the user to do something, and then it makes some service happen. So all my service is going to do is it's going to get the time. So pretty dumb, but it's a pretty simple example of how this is all going to work. So let me delete this text view right here and instead draw a large one so you guys can see it better. And this, of course, is eventually going to display the time whenever the user clicks a button, and we'll give them this button right here. So just so we can be clear on what's going on, this button they can click, and we'll say like, what's the time? So they click that, and it'll display the time, so we really don't need to change this text at all. However, what I would like to do is change the IDs of these. Alright, so the ID of text view could be Bucky's text, and the button ID could be Bucky's button. And the last thing I want to do is, of course, whenever they do click this, we want something to happen. So we need to go down to the on click, and what can we call this? Let's just call it show time. So again, we're going to have to build this method in a little bit, but eventually they're going to click it, and it's going to call some service, and the service is going to display the time on the screen right there. So pretty sweet. So let's go ahead and make that service now that we got our very basic interface set up. So of course, you guys already know how to do this. If you go down to your main package and right click and choose new service, just the plain one, and we can just keep the default name, why the heck not, and finish it up. So this is what we get by default. Okay, pretty sweet. But now we have to figure out, how do we make this binder thing, whatever the heck that is, how do we make this app the ability to connect with this service? Let me just rearrange this, and I messed everything up. Alright, so there we go. So the first thing I want to do is we need to create a new object, and this object is going to be responsible essentially for connecting whatever the app is called. It's called the client, and the service is just called the service. So we want to bind the client to the service. So that's the technical term. So we need first an object that's going to do this. Now, we need to import some stuff first. Alright, so import android.os binder, and of course we need to import all the stuff to make us to give us access to change the time. So that is just java.text simple date format, import java.util.date, and import java.util.local or locale, whatever. Alright, so now that we got all of our stuff that we're going to use imported, we can first create an object that's going to be the binder object. So again, this is kind of like the bridge that's going to connect your app to your service, or your client to your service. So I'm going to go private final. It's an iBinder object. I'm just going to name mine Bucky's binder, and we're going to set it equal to new my local binder. Now this, as you notice, is going to give us an error because this is a class that we didn't create yet. Now I'm going to mention this right now. The way that you bind a client to a service, it's kind of weird how Android makes you set it up, but I promise by the end of this video you're gonna understand it. However, when I'm trying to talk through it, it's a weird little process, and it kind of involves an extra step that you may think, okay, what's the point of that? And I think it too. It's just the way that Android makes you do it. Alright, so again, this is the object that's going to be responsible for the bridge, the bind between your client and your service. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create this class. So let me show line numbers and give myself a little more space. And we'll create it right at the bottom here. So public class let me just copy that. My local binder extends binder. Right there. So the first rule is whenever you want to bind a client to a service, you need to make an object that extends the binder class. And this says, hey, this class is going to be capable of binding two things together. Now the only thing we want this class to be capable of doing is returning a reference to this. It's pretty much superclass, because whenever we have access to that, we can use all the methods that are in here. So if you go to my service, or whatever you named your service whenever you started, and make a method called get service. Now all this method is going to do, and this is the only method that's going to be in the class, is it's going to return my service this. So again, essentially what it boils down to is whenever we want to bind a client to a service, we need to create a new class that has the ability to bind. Now the only thing this class is going to do is it's going to return a reference to this class, and then we can use the stuff inside here. So pretty simple enough. Again, it's kind of weird that you have to like make something to get inside what you were already just at, but you know, that's how it works. Now the one last thing that we need to do is for this onBind, if I can select everything, what this method is going to do, if you delete all of this, it's just going to return Bucky's binder. Alright, so let's step back and see what's going on. Eventually, this is our client, this is our main activity. It's going to try to bind to this service. Now whenever this activity binds to this service, it goes inside here and it looks for a method called onBind. So this is what you want me to do whenever I'm trying to bind. Well, what instructions are you giving me? Return Bucky's binder. So what Bucky's binder is just an instance of this class right here, and this class gives you access or returns a reference to my service, pretty much allowing you to access anything inside here. So again, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here, and then here, and then we can access the stuff inside the class. And I know it's stupid, but that's how Android makes it work. And most of the time, people just they just like copy this and paste it, but you know, you're already like one step ahead of everyone else, because most people, to be honest, they don't even know how it works. But now we know how it works behind the scenes, and well, we're on our way to becoming a pro Android developer. Now, one other method I'm going to put in this class. Of course, this service has to do something, right? I mean, now that we got access and did all the hard work, it's going to be a waste of time if it doesn't do anything. So remember I said that the main point of this service is just to get the current time. So this is finally the easy part. So public string, I'll just name it get current time. And all this is going to do, and if you ever watch my like normal Java tutorials, you're going to understand all this. So new, simple date format. And how do you want to display the time? Well, let's just display it like a clock. The hour in front, then the minutes, then the seconds. You can actually have dates in here like months, years, days, but I just wanted to display time really simple. And I'm going to set mine to the United States because I am in the United States right now. And of course, we need to return it. So return the date format, DF, not DTF, and the format is just a date object. So again, we're pretty much just returning a date object, and then we're saying, okay, this is how I want you to format it, with the hours, minutes, and seconds. So again, this is actually the easy part, and eventually whenever we bind to this service, we're going to be able to call get current time, and it's going to give us the current time. So now that we got all the hard stuff out of the way, the next tutorial, finishing everything up, writing the code in here, binding to the service, is actually going to be pretty easy to understand. Alright, hostage, so let's finish this up, and the first thing we need to do is import a bunch of stuff. Android.view import. Actually, let me pause my video and I'm gonna import everything we need to. Alright, so I imported all the stuff we're gonna need for, of course, to reference our interface and also to connect. Now another thing I want to mention is for this last one, in order to be able to access that weird little binder class that we made, make sure that you import your package name right here, and it's just copy this package, whatever it is, and then get this class name and then this class name. So again, package, superclass, binder class. Alright, so now once we do that, we can go ahead and actually start writing some code. But first, let me show my line numbers and give myself some space to write. Alright. So the first thing we need is, of course, my service object, and I'm just going to name this Bucky's service, and this is just a reference to this class right here. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to make a variable called isBound. So eventually we're going to be testing, is this client bound to a service? And by default, of course, since we didn't bind it yet, we're just going to start it off as false, and whenever we bind, we're going to set it as true, and that's just so we can check the state of our, what's it called, like bindedness or whatever. And I want to delete all these because I hate these extra comments, and you guys will be able to read all the important code easier. Let me tighten this bad boy up. Alright. So, the first rule is, whenever we want to bind to a service, we need a service connection class. Now, what this class is going to be responsible for is it's pretty much going to say, okay, when you bind to the service, what do you want to happen? And when you disconnect from it, what do you want to happen? So again, those are two things that we're going to need to stick in there, but first we need that class. So after all of your methods, give yourself some space in private service connection, and you can name it anything you want. I'm going to name mine Bucky's connection. Again, this is going to be the class that's responsible for binding to some kind of service. So again, set it equal to new service connection, and make sure you add your semicolon right there. And as you see, whenever we created it, it auto-completed all of the stuff that we need to have in it. Again, this is really simple. On service connect, it says, what do you want to happen when you try to connect? On service disconnect, okay, whenever you disconnect from the service, what do you want to happen? So I know it's a lot of code, but it's really easy to understand. So whenever we try to connect to a service, all we want to do is we want to reference this binder subclass, and then it pretty much takes it from there. So if we go to my local binder, and then we can just name it binder or something, and we set this equal to my local binder service. Let me finish straightening up this one last line of code. Alright, so Bucky service, set it equal to binder dot get service, and we'll change that isBound variable to true. Alright, so what did I just write, and what does this all mean? So all this is right here is a reference to my local binder, in other words, that binder class that we wrote last time. Now once we have access to that class, we're going to call the method getService. So we know what that does. And all getService is going to do is it's going to allow us access to this class so we can use all of the cool methods in there. Now that takes care of the connection, and just for housekeeping, checking and stuff, I'm going to set isBound equal to true, because that means, okay, we are now bound to a service. Pretty stinking sweet. Now of course you guys already know what's going to happen here. One line of code. Whenever we disconnect from that service or get booted out for some reason, we're just gonna change this to false. Easy enough. So now what I want to do is I want to go up to onCreate right here, and whenever we create this activity, that's when we want everything to start. So just like before, we're going to make an intent called I, set it equal to new intent, and alright, so this is our intent. This is what we intend to do. MyService.class. Now check this out. This is where things get a little bit weird. Now instead of just starting the intent, which would be for a normal intent, remember, we want to bind to this. We want to connect to the service. That's the whole point of this tutorial. So if we call a method called bindService, this is a built-in method that allows us to bind to something, and the parameters it takes are your intent, where is it located. The second one is Bucky's connection. So the second parameter it takes, it has to be an object from the service connection class. So that's why we just couldn't stick this code anywhere else, because this method to bind to service, it requires an object from this specific class. Alright, now one last parameter. Wow, that is definitely ignore security. That didn't sound good. So context, why can I not type today? Bind auto create. So again, you guys already know what this does right here. I already explained it. No need to explain it again. So the last thing that we need to do is, you're probably scratching your head and you're like, alright, so this looks good and all, but okay, we're connected to this and then get the time, but how the heck does it show? Because I know that we had this button right here and it called a method show time. So shouldn't this app do something useful, like implement that method? So yes, let's just go ahead and do that right now. So again, this is the easy part. Public void. I'm going to start my emulator right now. Alright, alright, alright. Get out of my way. Get out of my way. Thank you. Alright, so public void show time. This is going to be the main method responsible for actually showing the time. And string current time set equal to Bucky's service. Alright, move that out of the way too. So Bucky's service get current time. Because remember, once we take care of all of our housekeeping stuff, this Bucky's service is essentially going to be a reference to this class, and it's going to allow us to access all the methods in here, which, look at that little gem, get current time. So after this, of course, we just need to update that time on the screen. So text view, Bucky's text, and set it equal to text view, find view by rdr.id.Bucky's text. And of course, now that we have a reference to it, we can just call set text, and the current time is going to be current time. Pretty sweet. So there we go, and now let me just wait for my emulator to start up. Actually, I forgot to... As my views along there. Alright, so hopefully, cross your fingers, I'm going to click this and check it out. It now is connecting or binding to the service, which is returning the time and displaying it on the screen. So whenever I click it, it calls it again. So remember, this end is 6 seconds. Click it again, 11. Pretty stinking awesome. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create a bound service. In other words, how you can create an activity that can communicate to your service. Technically, it's called a client communicating or binding to your service, but whatever, I don't give a F. Alright, so thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video, and just a warning, it is 1:18 a.m. and I was bored, so I decided, you know what, might as well make some videos. So if I'm a little groggy or anything like that, I'm just gonna blame it on that. So yeah. Okay, let's refocus here. In this video, we're gonna be learning about list views, and that is this thing right here. So what is a list view? Well, obviously it's a cool type of widget where you can make a list out of. Alright, boring Bucky. Moving on to the next video. Wait just a second, Haas, because it's more than just a way to make something like a text list, like a grocery list or a list of your favorite movies. What you can also do with the list view, and you guys have used this on every single social networking app, if you ever use like Facebook or Instagram or Google Plus or even Twitter, you know how each of the tweets or each of everyone's posts is in a big, it's either like a feed or a stream or something, and you can just scroll down forever? Each of those items are list items. So here's mine, the New Boston app we're making right now. So here you see one post right here, and of course what you could do on this activity is you can just scroll down forever and ever and ever, and each of these posts is actually a list item. So yes, you can have a very simple list where you just have text, like a grocery list, but you can also have lists of entire posts with pictures, text, embedded pictures, images. Very, very cool. So again, in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the real basics, the structure of how you create a list, and then in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to create custom list items if you ever want to make like a social networking app or a news feed or anything like that. So let's go ahead and get started. What I did already is I created a blank project, just added one blank activity, you know, nothing new. So the first thing I want to do is in my activity main, hop over to the source code view and get rid of that text view because I hate it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a list view in here, and again, remember I said if you want to do it with the design mode, just scroll down and drag one of these bad boys on there. But for the width, I'm just going to hit match parent, and for the height, I'm also going to throw in match parent. And this is just because I want my list to pretty much take up the whole screen, since that's the only thing we're learning in this tutorial. So you know, I don't need to do anything weird with it. I can just fill it to the size of the parent. And actually, the one other thing I want to do is, let me give myself a little more room here. So make sure your list view selected, and of course we're going to need a way to reference it through our code, so give it an ID. I'm just going to name mine Bucky's list view and hit enter. Now another thing I want to point out is whenever you add a list view to the screen, you're going to see these default list items. But this is just for pretty much whenever you're designing it, you can see, okay, there's going to be a list in here. Whenever you actually run your app, you're not going to see this, you know, all this text and stuff. This is just for, you know, designing, like I said. So actually, whenever you run your app, we're going to be adding all of the items manually through Java code. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So hop over to your main activity.java, and the first thing I need to do is import a bunch of stuff, but instead of you just watching me do it, I'm going to go ahead and copy it real quick. And I probably should mention this as well. If you want any of the source code, then of course it's all on my forum, so if you don't feel like, you know, watching me or copying me import everything, then you can just go to my forum, grab the code, and paste it in. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So 1 second. Alrighty, so let me paste that in right there and tighten all of this stuff up. Alright, so the first thing I actually want to do is fix all of these errors. And for the action bar activity, this of course means that you want an action bar across the top of your app. I actually just want to inherit from activity because I'm not really worried about that action bar for this tutorial. This tutorial is going to be a very stripped down app just to demonstrate lists, like I said. So therefore we can delete these two override methods. So the only thing we have is onCreate. Essentially, whenever your activity gets created, what do you want to happen? And we're just going to focus on the list stuff for right now. So after your set content view, which pretty much sets your user's view to whatever this layout is, let's go ahead and add some code under here. So like I said, for the very first tutorial, before we get into making like any cool streams or anything like this, we're just going to make a very basic list of text items. So whenever we want a list of text items, what we can do is we can just make an array, because that's what lists are. And I'm just going to make mine of foods, but you can use like names, items, girls you want to date, whatever. I'm just going to throw like 5 or 6 in here. Bacon, ham. These are also going to be my kids' names whenever I have kids. Baby tuna, candy. Let me add like 2 more. I'm gonna have a kid who's a bit of a chunker. His name is gonna be Meatball, and I'm also gonna have a kid named Potato. He's probably gonna look like me. Alright. So again, once you have something that you can create a list of, go ahead to the next line of code, and now we need to understand one important concept. So, as I told you guys, a list can be multiple things. It can be just plain text, like we have right here. It can also be images. It can also be a combination of images and text. So these list items are kind of a weird thing. So what we need to do is we have a little trouble just taking a list of strings in Java and turning them directly into list items. So in order to do that, we need something called an adapter. Now this adapter is going to be responsible for the conversion of Java code to list items that your activity can use. So again, I'm going to show you guys how to make a real basic adapter right now just for text or strings, and that's this. If you go to list adapter, you can name it anything you want, Bucky's adapter, and you need to set this equal to new array adapter. And again, the array adapter object is going to say, okay, so you're trying to convert an array, which we have right here, to list items. So it says, okay, what data is in your array? Well, of course, this is just a string array, and the parameters that go in here are this, and that's just for housekeeping whenever you create a new array adapter. Now, another one is android.r, and I'll explain what this means in just a second. Alright, layout dot, and watch what happens. Whenever I type simple, we get all these weird things that pop up. Simple list item 1, simple list item 2. What the heck does that mean? I'll explain in just a second. And the third parameter is foods. Plural. Alright. So again, we already know that this is the adapter that's going to be responsible for taking an array. That's why it's called array adapter, and converting it into list items. So this is just a keyword for housekeeping whenever you create an object. The next one is, how do you want your list items formatted? Now, of course, by default, it gives you a couple different options. Simple list item means just make it like you would think The best way I can explain it, if you know just like a HTML list or a list in like Microsoft Word, just a basic text list, use simple list item 1. So again, I know it's kind of a weird name, but eventually whenever we create something like this, we're not even going to be using that because we're going to be writing our own custom ones, but for now, just memorize it. Now the last one is, of course, okay, you're trying to create an array into a list, so where is your array? Well, of course, ours is foods right there. So now we have a list of strings, and now we have something that can convert it into a list. So of course what we have to do now is get a reference to this list, and you guys already know how to do that. It's a list view object in, what was the name of this? Bucky's list view. And just set this equal to typecast into a list view and find view by ID r.id dot Bucky's list view. So now we got a reference to this list view. Pretty sweet. And the last line of code we need is this. Take that, no, not that, Bucky's list view, which is on that user interface, and set the adapter. And what you pass in here is, of course, Bucky's adapter. So what do you want to convert to list items? Well, just look at Bucky's adapter, and that'll give you the answers. And it says, okay, it's trying to convert the foods array to list items. So again, in order to get an array of strings to display in a list, what you need is a converter. And this is how you create that right there. So now this is actually good to go. If we just want to go ahead and run this, we can do that. And here we have it, a very basic list. Now, of course, as I said, if you had more than 6 items, like if you had, I don't know, like 100 items or something, then they would go off the screen, but the user can scroll down, kind of like you're scrolling through a news feed or a stream or whatever social network you use. So there it is right now, and as you can see, whenever we click them, absolutely nothing happens. So this is a pretty worthless app. So the next thing you probably want to know how to do is how to make something happen whenever you click one of these list items. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So let me get this out of the way. Alright, so after your last line of code in the onCreate method, go down, and if you go to Bucky's list view, what you can do is you can set on item click listener, and what this is going to do is it's pretty much a listener to see when you click an item in that list. So inside here, this is, you did all this before, new adapter view right here. And instead of that, what we want to do is we want to call a method called onItemClickListener. And inside here, we have to just hold Alt Insert because we want to override onItemClick right here. Alright, so again, what this is doing is it's setting up a listener on your list. So now your list is waiting for the user to click something. And whenever they do, it gives you some information about what item they clicked, the position. Most of this stuff is just behind the scenes, but I'll show you guys how to do something like print out the name of one of these list items. And we'll just print it out as a little toast, that little notification. Alright, so I'm just going to store the name in a string called food and set this equal to string. Actually, if I type this out and talk you guys through it from the inside out, it'll probably make a little bit more sense. So value of parent get item at position. Alright, so what this is doing is whenever you tap an item in your list, each of these have a position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of course. We actually don't even need to worry about that because that position, wherever they tapped, it gets passed along through the variable position, and of course it's an integer. So what we can do is we can just say, okay, get that position, which is some integer. It's really irrelevant to us, and just get the value of it and convert it to a string. So now what that's going to do is it's going to be equal to bacon, ham, tuna, whatever they clicked, and whatever that word is, we're going to store it inside the variable food. So now that food variable is going to be equal to one of these things, and we can just print it out in some kind of toast or something. So if we just go to toast, and of course it's make text, then if you go to main activity dot to this, well, you guys already know how to print out toast messages. Yep, it was named food. How long do we want to print it out for? We'll just print it out, I don't know, long, why not? And after this, in order to show it on the screen, you just show it like that. So again, this is a listener. Whenever they tap, it's going to give us information about the item we tapped. What we are doing is we're just extracting the name or the string value of it, storing it in the variable food, and then showing it as a toast. So let me run it and check it out. We can click meatball, it says meatball. We can click potato, and it says potato, the coolest app ever. So of course, if we just learn lists to make basic text lists, it would be a waste of time because we probably could have done this an easier way. Now the real power comes in learning how to create awesome list items that you can make into a stream or a feed, and you can create the next most popular social network in the world. So in the next tutorial, that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do. Create custom list item views. It's going to be awesome, and I'll see you then. Alrighty guys, so of course this list would be pretty boring and worthless if all we could do is stick text into it. So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to create custom list items. In other words, how to create something like if you want to make a Twitter feed or an Instagram or a the Facebook stream. What you can do is you can have these items consist of images, text, any widgets that you want. Actually, you can have inputs in there, whatever. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be making a very simple one. It's just going to have an image and a little bit of text to the right hand side. Say you're looking through like a list of your friends or contacts or something. However, once you understand the basics of how to create custom rows, then you guys are going to understand like how to make any type of layout. So I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. So this is what I want you to do first. Go ahead and grab any image. Let me minimize all this stuff. Alright, go ahead and grab any image from the internet just so you can have some image to play around with. I'm using mine, so if you want to use the same one as I am, then you can just go to my profile, right click, and save as, but make sure that it's at least 100 by 100 pixels, and if you have something that's square, it's probably a little bit easier. But here's my image right here. I named it Chunky. Now go to your Android project that you're working on and just go to it in Windows Explorer and navigate to this. Remember, whenever we want to use images, we need to stick it inside the resource, drawable, and whenever we have images in here, then we can use them in our layouts. So that's what we're going to do. So if you go to, like I said, whatever your project name was, and you go to app, source, main, res, this stands for resources, and I'll talk to you guys through in I don't know, 5 tutorials or something what all of these mean. You can just pick HDPI for now. Essentially, real quick, you put different images in here depending on, it has to deal with the user's device resolution and making it compatible with a bunch of different devices, but again, not really important. Just didn't want to skip over it real quick. Just stick your image in drawable HDPI, and now whenever you can actually just close out of this. Whenever you look at your project again, check it out. It automatically updates. You don't need to click a refresh button or anything like that. Alright, so to create a custom row, this is what we have to do. We actually make a brand new XML file. So if you right click layout and click new, you can just choose layout resource file, And I'm just going to name this file custom underscore row. Now for the root element, it needs some kind of root element, and let's just make this a linear layout and choose OK. So again, what we're going to be doing is, this is kind of like designing a fragment. You pretty much design the template for one individual list item, and then instead of this text right here, it's going to call whatever your design was. So if you have an image right here and some text on the right hand side, each of these rows is going to be image, text, image, text, image, text. So essentially we design one row, and then our code uses it over and over and over again. Pretty sweet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that image on the left hand side right here and the text on the right. So instead of layout, actually, alright, so vertical, as you can see, it kind of confused me because look at this. The icon for layout vertical is left and right here it's up and down. So I was like, what the heck? But you actually want it to be horizontal. And remember, when it's horizontal, that means this right here, so you can lay things left and right of each other instead of up and down. So we need two widgets in this layout right here. The first one is an image view. So if you go down to widgets, image view, then just take this and drag it right on top of your linear layout. So of course right here we can put an image in here, and we might as well take care of this right now. So just for this image, if I go down to source, then what I can do is I can do at drawable / chunky, because remember my image, it was named chunky, and just hit enter and look at that. So that's how you get an image file to show up right here. Go down to source, put at drawable, that's the folder name, and then the file name without the extension, without the .ping extension. Alright, so that looks pretty good. However, it's kind of, I don't know, big it looks to me right now. So I'm going to go up to layout width, and instead of wrap content, I'm going to change it to something like, I don't know, 50 dp. I don't know, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe like 80 dp. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing for height. 80 dp. Hit enter, and the last thing I actually want to do is, check this out. You see how it's butted up right up against the edges? I want to give it a little bit of space. So if I go to, oops, I'm on the wrong thing. Alright, so if I go to layout margin and all, what you can do is you can give margins individually, like I only want the left margin, I only want the top. But I actually just want to add a little bit of padding around all 4 borders, so I'm just going to give it like a 5 dp margin, and as you can see, what it does is it just adds a little bit of padding around every single side, and I don't know, I just think it looks a little better. So now that we got the image taken care of, what we need to do now is we're just going to add a text view, and I might as well just add a large text. So large text, drop it on linear layout again, and it's automatically going to place it to the right since you have your linear layout set to horizontal. And we can just leave this text whatever it is by default, because again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating these dynamically through Java. But for right now, okay, those both look good. I also want to change the padding on this. So for the layout margin, make sure you have your text view selected. What was this one? 5 dp. Might as well set it the same. 5 dp. Alright, looking good. And what else? I mean, it looks pretty good to me. Alright. So, again, for this tutorial, if this was a social network or something, we would want to change each of these images dynamically. But for right now, since we only have the string, I'm just going to be showing you guys how to change the text for every single row. And then once you understand how to change the text, you're going to understand how to change everything. You know, no use having like 5 different columns and then just typing the same code over and over again. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get an ID to this text view, because of course we need a way to reference it. So select your text view, go down to ID, and I'm going to name this Bucky's text and hit enter. Alright, so pretty sweet. This, of course, is the design for one individual row. So eventually, every one of these rows or list items is going to have an image icon and a bit of text to the right of it. So how the heck do we do that? Alright guys, so now that we have a custom row design or a custom list item design, we need to make a custom adapter, because remember, adapter is essentially responsible for taking code and converting it to this list item right here. So the one we had by default is right here, simple list item, and that only works with text. However, we have images and kind of weird layout right now, so that's why we need to create a custom one. So go to your package, and this is just going to be one file. So right click, new Java class, and I'm just going to name it custom adapter. Hit OK. And actually I already have my imports copied, so I'm going to paste them right in there. So if you want to pause the video and copy all those, then go ahead. Or if you just want to copy it from my website, you can do that too, whatever. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is get rid of public, so we just have class, and I want to, actually you need to, inherit from array adapter. So this essentially says, okay, what we're creating here is an array adapter, or an adapter to take an array and convert it to our own custom view. And let me arrange this. Alright, so just like before, right in here, what we need to say is what data are we working with? Well, the array that we're going to enter is just an array of strings, so that's why we put string right there. So it's giving us error because it says whenever you make an array adapter or you're trying to convert code to that view, you first need to use the constructor. So hit Alt Insert constructor array adapter right like there. And as you see, whenever we have the constructor, the error disappears. So we have two parameters that got passed in, context and int resource. Now this int resource right here is going to be that array itself. Now instead of an integer, it was actually a string array. So we're going to be passing in a string array as our resource, and we'll just call it foods so we can work with it. So of course we need to change this to foods. Now this context, whenever you see context, it just means information, and for right now it's just background information that whenever you pass it along to the superclass it needs. So we don't really have to worry about that, it's behind the scenes, pretty cool. However, what we do need is the superclass needs one more parameter, and in the middle put r.layout, and whatever you named your file, I named mine custom row, stick that right in there. So whenever you create an object, a custom adapter, you're going to accept a string and just treat it as foods, and for the layout, for each individual row or list item, use custom row. So it's going to go over to custom row. It says okay. So right now it has this string and it's looking at this, and obviously as human beings we can say, okay, well the text obviously goes in there, but this program isn't as smart as us, so that's what we have to do right now. So go back to custom adapter and we're going to create one more method, and this is actually an override method. So hit Alt Insert in override methods, and it is called get view. Where you at? Did I just see it? Get view right there. Alright. So what this is, and let me just get rid of all of that. So get view is where we say, hey, for those strings that we passed in, this is where I want you to put them. This is how I want you to lay it out. So the first two rows are actually just housekeeping. If you go to layout inflator, I think I talked to you guys about inflator before. Anytime you see the word inflate, it's kind of, I don't know why Android named it inflate, to be honest. It just means like prepare or get ready for rendering. It's how Android deals with laying things out on your activity. but you can just name it anything you want. Bucky's inflator, that sounds pretty cool. And just set this equal to layout inflator from get context. And by the way, context, I think I just said this, but anytime you see context, it just means background information. Boring stuff. Alright, now the important part is this. View, custom view, and this is essentially going to be equal to one custom row. So, view row, tomato, tomato. But if you set this equal to Bucky's inflator, inflate, r dot layout, custom row, or whatever you named your file right there, parent, and false, and that just has to deal with if you inflate anything to a parent, but we aren't worried about that. So the next thing we have to do is just get a reference to everything. Three different things. The first thing we need is a reference to these strings right here. The second thing we need is a reference to this text element, and the third thing is a reference to this. So to do that, it's pretty simple. The first thing I'm going to do is get single food item, and that's just something in my array. And in order to do that, just put get item position, because these, did I say these? This, can't even talk today, of course, is the position of each item in your list, and we saw that in the last tutorial. Well, actually like 3 tutorials ago. Whatever. So now we just want to get a reference to that text element that we created last time. Of course, that's a text view. And our custom view, which is a reference to this file. Remember, on here, what we can do is we can just call find view by ID, r.id.bucky's text, and do the same thing with image. So that was actually an image view, Bucky's image, and set this equal. Actually, I don't think I gave that image an ID. Alright, so, well, I did now, sucker. So this is Bucky's image, and set this equal to image view, custom view, find view by ID, and that's r.id dot Bucky's image. Where you at? There you are. There you are. Alright, so now we have a reference to everything that we need. Now, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to take Bucky's text, which is that text element on the activity, and we're just going to set the text of it to whatever food item it's referencing. Next thing we want to do is take that Bucky's image, and in order to change the image, you actually call set image, not image resource right there. Now, of course, r.drawable.chunky. Alright, so again, what this is going to do is it's going to change the text dynamically to each one of these items. However, since I didn't feel like loading in a bunch of different images or sticking those in an array, I'm just calling the same one over and over again. So it's just going to show my face over and over and over again. But of course, later on, whenever you make an actual app, you would obviously want to change that, unless you made an app and you just wanted to see my face a bunch of times, which I don't blame you because I'm beautiful. But the last thing we have to do here is just return custom view. So of course, this, which we just created, the whole point of these tutorials is create a custom view, so we have to return it, essentially saying, hey, use that. Now, the last line of code that we have to do is this. Right now, our adapter is still using this basic boring adapter, and obviously we just made this sweet custom one so we can use this cool row. So let's change this right here. Now the first thing you do is, well, we can keep the same name, why the heck not, but instead of array adapter, actually we can just delete all that. Alright, so of course, instead of array adapter, which is that boring built-in one, let's go ahead and set this equal to custom adapter. Thank you very much. Now of course, this for the constructor, Remember, it's just the context, which is background information. And the second thing is passing that foods array. So, of course, foods, and boom, there you go. So, I mean, that's that, ladies and gentlemen. So let me go ahead and pause and run it, and hopefully we don't got any bugs. And check it out, we now got custom rows. Ham, tuna, candy, meatball, potato. Clicking it, and it says potato. Meatball, this is the best app ever. Alright, so there you go. Obviously, this is the coolest app ever because it looks like all of your contacts are me, and these are all my nicknames. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create not only apps with, let me get this out of this, trying to explain this here in Android Studio, but that is how you create apps with list views using generic layouts and also custom layouts right there. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will smell y'all later. Alrighty, hosses, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial we're going to start learning about SQLite. And by the way, I just watched the movie Gone Girl. It's a pretty decent movie, and also if anyone has any really good movies that they would recommend, looking for like a good sci-fi movie, my favorite ones of all time are Contact, and there's this movie called Surrogates. It's a really good movie. I would recommend it. So what were we talking about? SQLite. So what this is a way to save information on your phone. So if you ever had like a computer game and you wanted to save the high scores, or maybe you're making like a checklist app and you wanted the user to be able to turn off their phone, then turn back on and have all that stuff saved for them, well then this is a tutorial for you. So before you get started, forewarning, you do need to know SQL, or at least the basics of it. If you don't, then go watch my tutorial. It's called My SQL Databases. If you go to my website, click Video and Tutorials, My SQL Databases, and it'll teach you the basics of SQL. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. What I did in this video is I made a brand new project, blank activity. We just got those two default files right now. And I'm going to drink some Gade, or Powerade actually. Flavor is that? Lemon lime. Not bad. Alright, so let's go ahead and delete this text view. And again, this example is just going to be for creating a really basic database. It's actually just a file that you can save stuff to. So I'm just going to have somewhere that the user can type something in, and they can either add it to the file or delete it from the file. And whenever we turn off the app and turn it back on, it's all going to be saved for you. So pretty simple example, so let's go ahead and get started. So again, the first thing is just a plain text. Drag that somewhere in the top middle. And that's really tiny right now, so change the width to like 300 dp, and change the ID of this as well. And I'll just put like Bucky's input. So this is where the user is going to be typing stuff in. And let's add two buttons right there, and let's add another one right there. So this first one is going to be if they want to add something to the file, then they're going to type it in and click this button. So let's change the text on it so they know what's going on. We'll say add, simple enough, and let's give it an ID of add button. Yes. Now on click, what do you want? What method do you want to call add button click? So this method is where we're going to be writing our functionality to actually add whatever they typed in to the database file so we can save it. So that looks pretty good. Now let's do the same for this button. So let's change the text first. Just change it to delete. So whenever they click this, it's going to delete one of those items. We'll say that this is, I don't know, just storing different items, whatever they type in. And on click, we'll just write like delete button clicked. And for the ID of this, of course, we'll just name it delete button. So again, what I want to do is we can just make an example that can save all your data in the background, and typically that's what you want to do. However, just so we can see what's going on in real time, I'm going to drag a large text in the drop middle of the screen right there, and I'm going to change the ID of this to Bucky's text. So again, all of the contents of the file are going to display in real time right here. So whenever we add, it's going to display in real time. As soon as we delete something, you're going to see it visually being deleted. Now, of course, you would only want to do this whenever they finish the game or whenever they add a new item to their checklist, but for this example, it'll work out just fine. Alright, so just so this example makes a little bit more sense, we'll say that we have some store, what we're selling, who knows right now, but we have some store and we want an app to keep track of all of our products. So, I just figured if we have some background information, that'll probably be a little bit easier to follow. So what we need now is, if you go in your Java directory and expand your first package, right click, new Java class. So make a class called products and hit OK. Now how we're going to set this up is like this. Each row in that database file that we save, it needs to be able to be represented by an object through Java. So then we can work with it in our code. Rearrange this. Alright. So whenever you have your table set up, you're going to have different columns. So we'll have a column for ID number of the product and also the product name. It'll be a really simple table. So therefore, if we want to represent it through a Java object, that object needs those two properties, an ID number and a product. So for every column, you need an additional property. Pretty simple once you see what's going on. So let me tighten this up, and the first thing that I want to do is just add those properties. So private int underscore ID. Now always name, whenever you have a table, you have that primary key, primary ID. Whenever you reference it in Java, make sure that you call it underscore ID, and Android depends on this underscore ID for a lot of things, so don't get too creative with the names. Now, of course, this is the ID of each product. Another thing we want to do is we want to add another variable for product name. So again, this is going to be a really simple example. If later on you ever want to add the color of the product or the type, category, size, whatever, you can just add more variables, which will essentially add more properties to your object. But for right now, just a simple example. Now after this, what I want to do is I want to add a constructor. So whenever we create an object, what's going to happen is we're going to allow the user to type in a name. So therefore we make a constructor with the product name being passed in, whatever they type in, like tuna or something, and then we'll just give it an ID number dynamically. It'll be auto increment, so the first one will always be 0, next one 0, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So actually, since this is just being passed in, we don't need that underscore. Alright, so again, all of our code in the constructor, all this is going to do is essentially they're going to pass in a product name, and it's going to set this property right here of the object equal to whatever name they passed in. Simple enough. Now, the only thing I want this class to be able to do is be able to work with that product object. So this is going to be the easiest thing you ever learn. If you hit Alt Insert, you just need to add all your setters. And of course, a setter allows you to give that object one of these properties, so we can give it an ID, or we can give it a product name. That's what setters do. And your getters. So Alt Insert. And of course, whenever we want to retrieve, say we're trying to print out the product name or get the ID for something, that's what the getters do. And this is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I want this product class to be able to do. So we can create new products, and then we can either give them IDs or names, or get their IDs and names. Pretty simple stuff. Alright guys, so one other thing I want to do before we move on to the next file is this. I actually forgot to public products. I just want to make an empty constructor, so then we aren't constrained to having to make a product name or pass in product name every time we want to create a product object. If we ever decide we just want to create an object and then set the name later on, we can do that with initializing it with an empty constructor. So after this, what I want to do is I want to actually add a new class, and I'm going to call this class myDB handler. Now, people typically call these DB managers or DB handlers, and what they are is it's going to be a class specifically for working with that database, with that file that we can save on the user's device. So let me delete this first and paste in all my imports, and while you copy these down, I'll explain this. So this class is going to be responsible for everything that you do with the database. Whenever you create a new database, whenever you upgrade a database, whenever you add products or items to that database, anything that pretty much if you're trying to do something in the sentence involves the word database, this is what this class is going to be responsible for. Now, another thing that I would highly recommend is after you type all the code from this tutorial, keep it and set it aside, because whenever you want to work with this again, pretty much whenever you want an app that can save stuff, you can just paste this in, change a few variables, and it's going to work fine. So the first thing we need to do in order to use the SQL database, we need to extend SQL open helper right here. So it's giving us some errors because it says, okay, there are a couple things that you need to do whenever you inherit from this class. Now we'll get to those in just a sec, but for right now, let me just go ahead and make a few variables. So we need to set up a few variables for A, what do you want to name the database, what do you want your table to be named, in variables that store each column name. So let's do that right now. So private static final int, the first one is database version. Now for right now, just set this equal to 1 because this is the very first time we're creating this database and I spelled version wrong. So this is our first database version. It's going to consist of one table, and that table is going to be able to store however many items you want, and those items are going to have an ID and a product name. Cool, pretty cool app. Oh, wait a minute. All my users are complaining because they want to be able to store the color of their products as too. Well, now I need a new database structure, so whenever you update your database, you're going to have to upgrade the version as well, and that just makes the rest of your app compatible with the information that you're trying to store. Simple enough. Oh, so now, let me copy these. Private static final string, and make a constant called database name. Now, of course, essentially what we're doing is we are saving the user's information to a file, so that way they can turn off their phone, go use other apps, and come back to here and it's saved. So inside the database name is just, what do you want to name the file? Well, I'm just going to name it product.db, whatever, or products, might as well, since they're probably going to store a couple in here. Name it whatever you want, but make sure you have that DB extension. That tells Android that there is a database file stored in here. So after this is pretty much just MySQL stuff. Public static final string table products, and what this is just the name of your table. So remember how MySQL works is you have a database and you can store a bunch of different tables inside that one database. Now for this example, we're just going to have one table in it, but of course that table still needs a name, and I'm going to name mine products. Now the only other two variables or constants that you need are this: the names of your columns. So again, they're strings, and I'm going to name it column underscore ID. And this is of course the ID, and if you just copy this, and however many columns you have in your table, then just add a new constant for each, but I'm only going to have two. Product name, and of course this is just product name. So again, if we ever decide to update our structure of the database, then we're going to need to change the version. This is just the file that you're saving on the device, the file's name. This is the name of your table, and for every single column in your table, just go ahead and make it a constant, so then if we ever have to change it, we don't have to change it a million times, only right here. So now let's go ahead and get rid of these errors. So these errors are saying, in order to use SQL storage on your phone, you need to do three things. You first need the constructor. Second, and we have to do some stuff to here, but I'm just going to show you guys what you need. Second, you need to override two methods. So let's go ahead and override methods, and that is onCreate and onUpgrade. Now, as soon as you add those, then the errors go away, but of course we need to understand what these mean. So the constructor is essentially just for housekeeping stuff. We need to pass some information along to the superclass, pretty much the class that works directly with Android and takes care of all the behind the scenes stuff for the SQL. So the first thing we need is context, which is this background information, which is fine. The next one is the name of your database. Oh, look at that, already took care of it right there. So pass along the name so it knows which file to save it under, and the factory background information. Now the version is what database version are you working with. Boom, roasted. Now, what are these methods right here? Well, the reason that we needed these methods are because it's saying, okay, whenever you create this table for the first time, what do you want me to do? Well, right now it's doing nothing, but of course it needs to know what you want to do, so that's why it made you implement this method. And this onUpgrade, if you ever are upgrading your version, then it's going to call this right here. So again, the very first time that we run this, it's going to call this onCreate method, so it would probably be a good idea in here to create that table so we can store stuff in it. So in order to do this, if you ever work with PHP or anything, it's probably going to be pretty easy, but we first need to make a new query. And you can name your variable anything you want. I just like naming it query. And the query of this is going to be create table, just like normal SQL. And of course, we need to pass table products. In other words, your table name. So create table called products. Now after here, it's saying, okay, well, what columns do you want? So add that little parenthesis, and now you give the names of all your columns. So the first one is ID. My nose is kind of like stuffy or something right now. Alright, let me just set up the structure for this first. Alright, so for each row, actually, let me just finish typing everything, and then it'll probably make a lot more sense. Alright, so again, this is probably the best way to set up your query. Create a table, and then after it you write the name of your table, which will be products, and then inside these little parentheses right here, you pretty much write the information about each column you want created with your table. So for the ID, what properties do we want for the ID? Well, this is pretty easy. Obviously, we want it to be an integer, a number. We also want it to be the primary key so that it can't be duplicated. So this is pretty much the unique identifier for this. And the last one is auto increment. So that way we don't need to pass it a number manually every time. It automatically increases by 1, saves us a bunch of code. Now for the product name, this is a little bit easier. The only thing we're going to write in here is text. Since we're going to be storing a word like ham, tuna, Powerade, Kleenex, whatever. I'm really just looking at everything around my computer. I see a Powerade, a Kleenex. It's for blowing my nose, people, not what you probably would think. And of course, I have a huge Christmas ham and a tuna that I rest my feet on instead of a footstool. Anyways, moving on. Not important, and it's definitely not weird at all. Let's go ahead and take db.exec.sql and pass our query in here. So this is essentially how we execute queries on Android, simple stuff. Now db got passed in by the SQL database, so we don't have to worry about that. And exec SQL, whoa, it's kind of weird to say. It means execute the SQL query. What query do you want to execute? Well, how about this one that we just created? So again, whenever it creates this database for the very first time, it's going to create this table right here, and once it's created, we can start storing some products in it. Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, actually before we get started, I want to tell you guys a little story. I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but in like the last 10 videos, I've been breathing really heavy. Actually, have been having a hard time breathing. And also, I know you guys can't see my house, but my house has been getting really dusty really quickly all of a sudden. Like, I would clean it one day, and then the next day it would just be dusty again. And I'm like, alright, I know I'm not that dusty of a guy, so what the heck? So when my last video was processing like 5 minutes ago, I had an idea to go down in my basement, and I looked in my it's kind of like my heater where all my air goes through, and the filter for my air duct system, it was caked in dust. So as soon as I opened the metal door and I looked at it, I was like, holy crap, that is what I've been breathing. So even now you guys can probably hear me. I just changed it like 5 seconds ago. But yeah, definitely found the solution to that. So good health, here I come. And it'll probably take a while for, you know, like all the fresh air to run through and for the dust to collect. But public service announcement, check your air filters for your duct system, even if you've been like breathing normal, because I don't know. Alright, wow, I wasted a minute and a half telling you about my breathing problem, so let's get started with the tutorial. So again, whenever your database is first created, it calls this, and all this does is it creates a new table. So on upgrade means, okay, I changed my database structure, or I just want to upgrade my database for something. So what do we want to do in here? Well, what we need to do is we need to execute a query, and essentially we're just going to say drop the current table or delete the current table and then create a new one. So hopefully you would have new code in here, maybe with like more columns or less columns if you wanted less columns. But the first thing we need to do is delete the current table. So drop table if, and this needs to be in quotes because it's a string. Alright, so drop table if exists, and after this you just write the name of your table, so table products. So this right here, drop means delete in SQL language, so this is going to delete the table, and in the next line of code, obviously if you just left it like this, you would have no table to work with. So what you need to do is you would actually need to call that onCreate method again and pass it along db because it takes this parameter. So again, that's all we're going to do on an upgrade. Delete the current table and then create a new one with the new structure, whatever it is. Alright, so we took care of all the housekeeping stuff. Now what I want to do is I'm going to add 3 more really easy methods. Now remember I said this class right here is for working directly with your database. So we're going to add one method for adding a new row, which is essentially a new product to the database. We're going to add another one for deleting a product from the database. And I'm going to add one more. And the last method is just take your database and convert it to a string. Now the reason I want to do that is because then we can print it out right here. Alright, pretty cool. So the first thing is, hold on a second. Just take a drink. Oh, wow, that tastes good. Alright. So where was I? Alright. So let me just say add a new row to the database. I probably should start commenting all of these methods. I think I'll do that from now on. Probably a little bit easier to follow. So public void add product. Now whenever we add a new product to a database, what we're going to do is we're actually going to pass it in a product object, because each of these objects is going to have an ID and a product name. So what we can do is we can just put product, and then we can extract the information, and it'll be a lot easier to work with that way. So what we want to do here is write content values. Now content values is a really handy way. It's actually a class that's built right into Android, but it allows you to set a bunch of different values for different columns, and then they allow you to insert all of them in one statement. So it just makes inserting rows into your table really quick and easy. If you don't really follow along with it, you will understand in like 2 seconds by the time we get done coding this method. So right now I'm just going to store it in a variable called values. It's essentially a list of values. That's all. So new content values. Alright, so the first value we want to put in here is put in. As you can see, it takes 2 parameters. The first one is what column do you want to be storing this in? Well, we'll just say that the product name is all we're worried about. And the second one is what is the value that you want to put in that column. So whenever we pass in a product, what we can do is we can actually call a method called get product name, and that's going to retrieve the product name for that, and of course doesn't take any parameters. So essentially we're going to put the product's name into that column. Now we actually do need to do a couple more things first in order for this to work. The first thing is we need this object right here. This object is pretty much our key to the database, so we can just treat it as DB and set this equal to get writable database. So again, this DB symbol right here is now equal to the database that we're going to write to. Simple enough, obviously. Now instead of just calling execute SQL, there's actually some other methods you can call on your database. One of those is insert. Now the insert takes 3 different parameters, and actually if you ever do this, if you ever want to know the parameters or more information about a method, select that method and hold down Control and hit Q on your keyboard. So the first thing is the table. The second one is we actually don't even need to worry about the null second parameter. And the third one is the values, and it takes it in content values. Oh, look at that, we have that right there. So the first thing is the name of your table, which is table products. The second one is that optional null. I'll tell you guys about this in probably the next tutorial. And the third one is a list of values. Oh, well, look at that. We only have 1 item in here, but it'll do for now. Now, this line, of course, is going to insert a new product or a new row into your table. And the last thing that we have to do is, just for housekeeping, we need to close your database to say, okay, Android, we're done with it. You can have that memory back. So after we add the functionality to add a product, again, that's going to happen whenever they click add. What I want to do now is make the method to delete product from the database. That is a lot easier whenever I add those comments. Give myself some room. Alright. So public void delete product, and in here we're going to pass in string product name. Alright. So this is how we're going to delete products. Alright. So whenever, let's say that our list of products was tuna, ham, and meatball. So if they ever want to delete a product, they can just type meatball right here and click delete, and then it's going to search your table for meatball and delete any meatball instances. So again, if they ever want to add something, type the name and add it. If they ever want to delete something, type the name of the product they want to delete and hit delete. So therefore, we pass in product name, which is going to be whatever they typed in. And what we're going to do after this is first, actually we can just copy that whole thing. I don't need to explain that again. Get a reference database, just like before, and we can just call DB execute SQL. There are different methods that you can call on this object, but this is probably the easiest way. Now, in order to delete a single row from a table, we don't want to use drop, because drop means delete the entire table. What we want to do is we want to delete from, and then after this you need the name of your table, which is delete from this table, where, and then it says what clause do you want to use to delete from. Well, we just want to delete wherever the column product name, and actually let me make sure I don't type this weird. Alright, so we want to do equals, so equals, and then we want to escape that. And product name. So one second, I'll talk you guys through. I just want to make sure I don't mess anything up, because I could potentially do that. And it looks pretty good right now. So again, whenever you want to delete something from your table, you're going to hit delete from this table wherever the product name is equal to whatever product name we passed in, which is going to be whatever they typed in. And of course, end your SQL statement with a semicolon, and this semicolon is just for ending this line of code right there. Alright guys, so the last method I want to add to this little class is just a method to print out the database as a string, just so we have something to display for this example. And this isn't even really part of the tutorial. I just want to do this real quick. So we'll say print out the database as a string. Alright, so public string database to string sounds like a good name for it. And what is this? Give me. That is because I named it products. Alright, so that was annoying me. Alright, so anyways, to print out the database as a string, we probably need a variable to save it in. Again, I'm just going to do this real quick, so try to explain everything though. Alright, now we need a reference to the database, and how about that reference? Looks good. Alright, now we need a query to query the entire database, so string query, set this equal to select all from, why are you not in where you're supposed to be? Select all from the table, and the table is table products, where pretty good. Might as well just copy that whole thing. Alright, so the query to select all the data is select star. This means everything from this table, where one also means every condition is met. So this means select every column, and this means select every row. Alright, so now that we have a query, again, this tutorial doesn't really deal with cursors or anything, but just so I don't leave you guys hanging, a cursor is going to point to a location in your results. So just think of it like a pointer, where if this was the first row, then it would point to here. If it was the second row, it would point to here. It's just so Android can manage where you are in your results and what you want to print out and everything like that. And the object for that is C. And if you just call db raw query, then you can pass your query in null. So now we have a pointer, and to move it to the very first location, move to the first row in. Again, so this is a cursor, and the results that it is pointing to is the results of this query, and to move it to the very beginning we just call move to first on it. Not really important, but you know. Now what I want to do is I want to say while not C dot is after last, and I'll explain this in just a second, guys. So get string, and in the parameter here, get column index, and the index is product name, and make sure that this is not equal no. Alright, so what this is pretty much saying is the C, which is your cursor, is after last. You want to make sure that it's not positioned after the last row. This is essentially saying make sure that you still have some results to go. When you're done parsing through all of the results, of course, I guess we can just end this now. Probably makes sense if you just close your database, and since this method needs to return a string, we're just going to return the database string. So of course, this is essentially going to loop through each row in your database. So every time we loop through a row, we just want to tack on some information on the string that we're going to return, because the string that we return is going to be printed out right here. So again, I know this is a real quick one too, but this is kind of like extra bonus stuff for your tutorial. So in order to add stuff onto the string, plus equals C, the cursor get string, and this is C dot get column index product name, and then db plus equals, and I just want to bump it onto a new line. And that is because this is not a string. Alright, so in order to get, let's say we had three different products. So we would have three different rows. Each of those products would have an ID and a name. So it would be like apples, bacon, and cats. Say that it was the weirdest store in the world. All this would do is it would loop through all the results in your table, every single product, and every time it did, it extracted the name of that product and added it to the string. And this just makes it on a new line, because if we didn't, then it would just say like apples, bacon, cats, and it would all run on one single line, and it would look kind of weird. So again, this is what all this is doing. Let me clean this up a little bit, and alright, looks good to go. So now the only thing that we have left to do is we need to hop back in main activity, and we can actually delete both of these right there, and we just need to make it so the interface right here can interact with this database handler. Pretty simple, so I'll actually do that in the next tutorial. Alright guys, so finally we get to the easy part. Now that we're done typing all the hard code, the background functionality to pretty much make our app work with the SQL database, what we can do is just say, okay, this is the button to add a product, this is the button to delete a product. We essentially just need to hook up our interface with the code, simple enough, and we do that through main activity. So all of my imports that we're going to need are right there, so you can just copy all of those. Now let's just go ahead and get a reference to everything on our interface, all of those widgets. So edit, text, we called that Bucky's input, text view, we called that Bucky's text, that's where we're going to be printing everything out. And remember, my DB handler, we'll just call this DB handler. Alright, so now let's go ahead and on create and do the housekeeping stuff. So Bucky's input, set this equal to edit text, find view by ID, r.id. Bucky's input, and the same thing with Bucky's text equals text view, find view by ID r.id dot Bucky's text. Now after this, we need to set our DB handler object, and of course that's equal to new, what was that, my DB handler. Now remember, whenever we create a new database handler, it takes, where's a constructor, 4 parameters. The context, which is just going to be the keyword this from the other class, and we can just use null for the name of the database because we already set it equal to the constant right here. We can pass null in for factory, and it'll do all of that behind the scenes. And for the last one, we need to pass an int, so we can just pass in 1, but it'll actually get the value from right here. So again, that's this for the context, null, null, 1. Essentially, we're just letting this class take care of all the hard stuff, and we already talked about that before. Now, we're going to have 3 methods in here. One method is going to be for this add button. Remember, we said on click, call the add button clicked. Another method is going to be for the delete button clicked. And the last method is just going to be for printing this out. It's going to be real simple, like 3 lines of code. So whenever we do that, we'll just call a method called print database. It won't even take any parameters at all. And it's giving us an error because we need to implement that method right there. So this is just going to be public void, and it's not going to take any parameters. The only thing that it's going to do is it's going to set the text of this to whatever we retrieve when we call database to string. Simple enough. So the first thing we need is a string, and we might as well just reference it through db string and set it equal to the database handler dot, and remember that method was called database to string. So this is what we coded in the last tutorial, and we're just taking whatever string we retrieved, which pretty much is the product name of every single row, and we're going to store it in that variable. And now we just take that Bucky's text, which is our text widget, and set the text, not set enabled, set the text equal to db string. And after this, what I want to do is I want to take Bucky's input, and I also want to set the text equal to blank right there. And the reason I want to do this is because, well, I'll explain this in just a second. Essentially, we are going to print the database, whatever is in our file, after we add a new item or after we delete an item. So whenever we type watermelon and add it, then what's going to happen is it's going to print out watermelon down here, but then, just to make it a little bit easier on the user, we automatically are going to erase the text that was in here, so that way they didn't add watermelon and the word watermelon's still chilling up there. So this just makes it a little bit easier on the user if you refresh their input for them, so they don't have to delete it manually. So now, to the database. Alright, so now we have to implement that add button clicked. So public void add button clicked. And that's also why we didn't need a reference to those buttons up here, because whenever we add the on click method, it pretty much takes care of all the hard work for us, which is really awesome. Alright, so product, and set this equal to new products Bucky's input dot get text dot to string. And let me type all this and then I'll explain what's going on. So DB handler add product and print the database. Alright, so whenever they click the add button, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, they're going to have type something in here, like, I don't know, what's something that you can have in your store? Tennis shoes. So we're going to take tennis shoes, add it to the database, so we're going to save it to a file, and then we're going to display tennis shoes down here. Now if you look in our code, whenever we add a new product to the database, we don't just add the string, we actually create a new product object, and every time we create a product object, it sets the product property to whatever we passed in, like tennis shoes. So remember, this is the database handler, and whenever it adds a product to the database, it only accepts a product object. So if you look, add product, to add a new row to the database, it doesn't accept a string. It only accepts a product object. So whenever we pass in that object, it's going to extract the name, the string value, and then it's going to insert that string into the database. So again, this products is just normal objects, normal Java code. This is making everything compatible so it can insert it or extract it from the database, and this is just hooking up the interface with all of our code. And of course, we know what this does. It pretty much makes a string appear on the screen. And the only method that we need is that delete method, and that's public void delete button clicked. And alright. And also another thing I always forget to do is make sure you pass in your views as your parameters. If you don't, then it's not going to register that onClick method or whatever you set onClick as. Alright, so to delete an item, pretty simple. We take string, and I'll just name it something like input text. Set this equal to alright, so all we're doing here is we're getting whatever text the user jotted down in that little input, and then whenever we call DB handler, remember we're gonna delete product. Now delete product, this indeed takes a string, so we don't pass the product here, we actually pass the string value. So the input text, we can just pass the string value right there, and then we're going to print out the database on the screen. So again, you can set up your database handler a little bit differently, but this should work. So let me go ahead and start my emulator. Alright, so hopefully whenever we type something like bacon, we can click add and add it to the database, and then we can, let's add a few more tuna, oops, not press enter, and like meatball. And then if you ever want to delete one, you can just type in tuna and it will delete tuna, or whatever word you type in, it will delete it. And again, I know that I can't really demonstrate it, but if this was installed on a phone, or if you're testing this on a device, then what you can do is you can turn off your device and then you can turn it back on, and all of the information in your database is going to be saved. So pretty cool. And that is pretty much the basics of how to work with the SQLite database to save data.